So, as you know, every Futures Friday we start with a shout out, a thank you, and today it is very specific. I'm in an area in the greater Madison area called Middleton. Specifically, I'm in Middleton Hills. And the shout out is to a visionary named Marshall Erdman, Erdman. It might have two N's, Erdman. Marshall Erdman, who over 50 years ago imagined what a true neighborhood should be like. And here are some of the things that he built into this vision. I'm not going to show you all the houses that are around here, but here's what I'm seeing. Every home has a porch on the front of the house, not the back of the house, the front of the house, to encourage neighborliness. Homes aren't built super far apart, so being in communication and in touch with our neighbors is one of the things we have to do to kind of live in a democracy. So again, kind of brilliant, and this was many, many decades ago. Right behind me, you see one of the, if I counted correctly, there are 6 parks in this neighborhood, which is maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 square miles. And the intention was every human should be able to live within a public, short walk of a public park or recreation area. And you are going to hear people walking by and going by. You might hear my little dog Pip in the car barking at other dogs as they go by, but people are out and about with their neighborhoods. It's very multi-generational in this neighborhood. So Erdman had a vision of what neighborhoods could truly be. And all of the architecture in this part of Middleton Hills is Frank Lloyd Wright architecture. So Frank Lloyd Wright was a Wisconsin-based architect who later in his life moved to Arizona, but his footprint is here in the Spring Green and Greater Madison area. So I want to give a shout out to Marshall Erdman because the homes in Middleton Hills have maintained and grown in value. He was a visionary, a pioneer who understood what a modern neighborhood really should be like. And, you know, back in the day when my company published our first Hot Jobs, Cool Communities report, we measured the indexes that make cities extremely livable for young professionals. And in Erdman's design is so many of those things, making sure it's very walkable, making sure it's neighborly, making sure that you can meet most of your acts of daily living within a short walk. So there's a short metro market short walk to a metro market and Prairie Cafe and Bakery. So a tip of the hat to Marshall Erdman, who had a vision for what a neighborhood could be. And this is his vision brought to life in Middleton Hills. All right. So let's toggle over to the signal of the future. So the signal of the future, it's going to be the one coming out on Monday. So you are getting a sneak peek for those of you who are live today or who will be watching this over the weekend. The signal is token, the word token. What am I talking about with a token? Well, you've heard a lot about AI, and you probably know that the foundational models in the United States, born here in the US, are, ChatGPT, which is done by OpenAI, Claude, which is done by Anthropic, Perplexity is another, common large language model. And you probably know that China also has its own large language models, which run on a fraction of the energy that the US born large language models run on. But here's what a token is. Some of you may know, especially if you're in computer science or you know somebody who programs, that both Claude and ChatGPT have come out with coding models. And these models are very resource intensive, not only intensive for energy. We hear a lot about data centers and AI and the need for more energy, but they're also very intensive with the amount of compute that is needed. So tokens are the way of measuring like a unit of compute. So when you go on ChatGPT and you ask it whatever question you're going to ask it, let's say you require 2 tokens of compute. Well, now that we're doing more coding using the large language models, the amount of compute required to run, to create a small app or to, code a piece of like code some HTML for a website, it's much greater. And I'm told that the amount of compute between February and April of 2026 quadrupled. That's what these large language models are requiring. So once again, China is demonstrating that it can do more with less. So not only is China able to do more large language model processing with less energy, but it's also demonstrating how it can do it with less compute. So last year, you may remember that I said China may have already won the war for AI because of how they were able to do a lot more with a lot less. This is another data point in that direction. So when you hear the word token in the future, how much tokens does this require? It's getting at the amount of computing power that is required for each of these prompts that we're putting into our large language model. Okay, that's it. Now, here's a question. Here's a question I often get when people find out that I'm a futurist, or if we're doing the Think Like a Futurist training class, right? People will be like, a very common question I get is, how do I take this back to my team? And this is there's a little construction work happening in the Middleton Hills area. This is a big thing, but I think there are generally a few things that you can do if you run a small team. The first thing, you've heard me say it all the time, is to spend 5 minutes in a meeting just asking, what signals of the future are you noticing? And, when we work with teams over time, this becomes part of the thing that we do at the beginning of every meeting. We ask, is anybody seeing some weak signals of the future, something that kind of caught you off guard? And especially if you, as a team leader or a team manager, say, here's something I've noticed. So you can't just throw it open for your team and expect them to do it, but you also want to join with, like, here's something I've noticed. And one of my very favorite signals, we were working with the city of Greeley with their senior management team. This was back when Raymond Lee was still their city manager. And we would start every workshop with, all right, what are the weak signals that you're noticing? And one of the people on the senior management team said, I have noticed a lot more legs sticking out from underneath cars. And this was maybe 2022 or 2023. And we started to talk about, like, okay, what are these people doing? He's like, I think they're doing their own mechanical work on their cars. Why is that happening? Well, I think, some shops have closed during the pandemic. People weren't driving as much, so they weren't, needing as many repairs on their cars. And it got us talking about sort of the state of the economy and sort of like weak signals of the economy. What does this say about, the number of mechanics who are available? What does this say about skilled trades? What does this say about people willing to do it themselves to save money? So weak signals of the future can be that plain, something that you notice on your way to work, more legs sticking out from underneath cars, right? So that's one thing you can do with your team. Another thing you can do with your team is you can introduce the idea of red teaming. And there's a lot of really bad hygiene, really bad meeting hygiene generally. Like, I hate meetings that are just book reports where everybody comes in and, like, they just give you their report or they show you their slide deck. There's no decision, no discussion. And my big thing is meetings should be about the 3 Ds: discuss, debate, decide. That's good meeting hygiene. So all meetings should have an agenda. As my friend Charlie wears on his hat, no agenda, no attenda, right? All meetings should have an agenda. All meetings should be framed around deciding, discussing, or debating things so that you're really getting the most out of everybody at that meeting. It's a good use of everybody's time. And then the third and final thing is, when you're facing a big decision, you should call a timeout towards the end of the discussion after a lot of the questions have been asked, and you should say, let's red team this. And what does that mean? It could be a prompt like, what would a community member who would be absolutely opposed to this idea, how would they tear this idea down? Or if you're, again, in a city situation, what would the most antagonistic alderman or city councilman have to say about this idea? And what you're doing is you're just constructively looking at the issue from all different angles. And I can't think of a single significant decision that a team of executives has ever made where taking even 10 minutes to just red team it before they move to a final decision wouldn't be a great idea. Now, how do you red team? Well, if you've got a team with a bunch of questioners anyway, just throw open the question. But if you have a bunch of, like, super polite people who are too afraid to, like, ask a hard question. You know, they're Midwest nice, or they're Omaha nice, or Nebraska nice. They're not New Yorkers. You know, they're going to need a little bit of prompting. So you could, as the boss, say, listen, I'm going to ask the first couple of challenging questions, but then I want others of you to pick this up. Or if you have a person on your team who's kind of a natural questioner, you could say, like, hey, Rebecca, you're really great at asking these kinds of questions. What might we be missing? So these are a few ways that you can bring some of the rigor and the strategy of strategic foresight to your team. Okay, now here is my try this at home. Here's my try this at home. It's conference season right now. You know, so many of you are going to your annual conferences, or, you know, maybe you're going online and doing conferences that way. And so you're running into some people that you know, or you're maybe making some new friends. There's a lot of turnover in all of our professions right now as baby boomers are leaving the workforce. Huge amount of leadership churn. So my recommendation, my tiny little hack for you, when you're meeting people, instead of asking what their role is or what city they work in, ask, what's something you're working on right now that you're excited about? It's a completely different kind of a conversation. You know, it shifts from the rote, trite, oft repeated who I am and where I work, and it shifts it to something that is more alive, is more dynamic, and is more future facing. So that's it. Thank you to Marshall Erdman. Signal of the week next week is going to be token, and now you know what it is. The try this at home is ask a question about what's exciting you about the future. And the frequently asked question is, Rebecca, how do you do this with your team? And I've given you 2 techniques that you can use with your team. I hope you guys have a beautiful Friday. And for all the moms and people who have played the role of a mom in the lives of others, we love you. We are so grateful for you. You have held us together in the difficult times, and you've built us up in the times that we've needed it. We appreciate you. Take care, everybody. Happy Mother's Day.